The train, long as this 19th century invention sparked the interest of children and adults alike. When the train rolled back into Hingham in May of 2007, people lined the tracks to greet it. After all, it had been absent for 48 years. However, to bring the train back to Hingham, the MBTA had to fight a long battle against very vocal opposition groups.
People spent 20 years fighting this project. It was just this huge cathartic experience for so many people.
It's $534 million to achieve a very dubious objective.
If it exceeded $100 billion, it wouldn't be built, and then it ended up being $500 billion.
Hinghamites debated whether the construction of the Greenbush Line was the most cost-efficient option, as the project was mired in political entanglements and highly disruptive to the environment and citizens. However, negotiations between the citizens group, AFTA, and the MBTA allowed Hingham to benefit aesthetically and economically from the project while gaining a convenient mode of transportation. Debate raged over whether the restoration of the train, a massively expensive project, was the most cost-efficient option.
Greenbush is needed. However, the amount of money it's cost, and to this date, as you read in that story, the ridership has been on the lower side. It's really hard to justify, I think, having it, only because it's $500 million that could be used elsewhere for a greater return.
Of course, Massachusetts taxpayers would be footing the bill. Representative Garrett Bradley of Hingham remarked, "I do think the project is going to be a burden to the community and the taxpayers. The project cost $520 million, a price that the MBTA simply could not afford. Other obstacles, such as AFTA's lawsuits, wetland permits, compensation disagreements over tracks in Braintree, and design problems in Weymouth Landing, delayed the project and raised the price tag further." John Buick, a member of AFTA, remarked, "The facts are unchanged. Greenbush is fiscally irresponsible." Already, Hingham had a successful ferry service. In a sense, the MBTA was competing with itself. 1/3 of Greenbush riders were once ferry riders. Many used bus lines or the Red Line. People rightly feared that the train would draw riders away from the commuter boat service, which was a proven success and less expensive than the train. Boat ridership in Hingham fell 17%. A Patriot Ledger article mourned how the Greenbush rail line was to supplement the commuter boat, not replace it. Additionally, throughout history, few long-term rail lines have proved profitable. It soon became clear that it would be impossible to meet the MBTA's projection for ridership. Michael Weymouth, a writer for the Hingham Journal, deemed the Greenbush restoration an expensive mistake.
If they had to make a choice between one or the other, the most cost-effective choice would be to expand the boats. But at this point, how can you make that argument?
Simply put, the money could have been used for other transportation options, ones that would be more cost-effective with a higher growth potential. More buses, an electric trolley, an HOV lane, or an extended ferry service were additional options. Such choices would take more cars off the road and sustain a healthy ridership. However, political entanglements urged people to push for the train, further complicating the debate.
Greenbush was built partially because it was required as mitigation for the Big Dig.
The Conservation Law Foundation sued the state, forcing it to remove cars statewide to compensate for the Big Dig. The Silver Line, the Green Line in Medford, and Greenbush were projects proposed to alleviate the effects of the Big Dig. Joe Sullivan in the South Shore Chamber of Commerce supported the train. Some politicians were pushing the project out of pure spite. Every step of the way, AFTA fought the project. Many Hinghamites opposed the train because they feared it would be disruptive to both the environment and citizens. A 1997 EPA study declared that 3,000 passenger cars produced as much nitrogen oxide in 1 year as a locomotive. The train would actually increase pollution. However, the MBTA's goal had been to reduce traffic congestion and pollution. The Army Corps was the closest federal agency to the Greenbush project. It did not issue a full EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, and instead issued a less comprehensive FONSI, finding of no significant impact.
The statement was inadequate.
However, hundreds of thousands of dollars have been put into animal crossing tunnels. Under the Wetlands Replication Rule, every square foot of wetlands harmed by the train had to be replaced on a 2-to-1 basis. Thus, the MBTA actually increased the area of the wetlands. People also predicted safety and congestion issues. Fears of noise pollution prompted the Federal Railroad Administration to approve a quiet zone along the Greenbush Line. Whistles would not sound here. Hingham police and fire departments have taken extensive measures to ensure safety near the track. Alexander McMillan, Hingham's Greenbush coordinator, fought to place appropriate fencing and easily visible railroad crossing fixtures along the tracks.
However, these debates resulted in a better project. And it was clear to us that unless extraordinary measures were taken, that the impact would far outweigh the benefit, at least in our community.
These extraordinary measures were taken. Negotiations between the citizens group, AFTA, and the MBTA allowed Hingham to benefit aesthetically and economically from the project while gaining a convenient mode of transportation. Hingham was able to offset many of the train's harmful effects in its downtown and historic districts with the titivation it found it received from negotiations between the citizens group, AFTA, and the MBTA with the Army Corps of Engineers. Many people assumed the introduction of a train into the town would destroy the charming and historic character of Hingham. Furthermore, Hingham residents were worried about the noise from the train itself as well as its horns or whistles.
We reached an agreement with the town reached an agreement with the MBTA. One, we would drop our lawsuit. Two, they would build a tunnel. Three, that they would create this fund to help offset the impacts downtown.
The successes of the compromise are obvious. The town got money to beautify the downtown where the train runs through, and you can barely tell that the train runs through beside it rattles. The train isn't actually very loud.
You hear a rumble, and it's like it's like a pickup truck going down the street, and that's it. I mean, it's much less invasive than any other commuter rail line in Massachusetts.
Greenbush additionally won an approved quiet zone, meaning whistles weren't permitted throughout the Greenbush corridor. While anti-train activists often cited the harmful impact the train would have on Hingham's economy and housing market, the town actually experienced a net growth in real estate prices due to the introduction of the train. According to Leo Corcoran's blog, a licensed real estate agent on the South Shore, housing prices jumped after the introduction of the train. Furthermore, people complained that they moved to Hingham under the assumption that a renewed train line would never affect their house.
People bought their houses that abut the train. They were told, worry about it. The train ended in the 50s, it'll never come back. And they were probably all pretty disappointed when the train did come back.
The final introduction of a train to your house has concerned some, with the anticipated vibrations and the decrease in aesthetic appeal of areas near the tracks.
There's a number of properties along the line that are dealing with really bad vibration problems, much worse than was anticipated.
It's going like 10 feet from behind houses. It's so close. Yeah, you couldn't be in one of those houses and not have it vibrate when it went by.
Though according to the Buick, some small properties are now for rent near the tracks, it turns out that the train foreshadowed a net gain in real estate. The train also didn't precipitate an economic decline in Hingham as some had thought it would.
If you go back and if you went and talk to some real estate agents, Situate, Cohasset, and Hingham, they did not experience the market slow down like so many of the other towns around here did.
The Merchants Association has become far stronger, and that's been attractive to everybody who lives here.
The key benefit the train brought to Hingham and surrounding towns was the increased convenience of transportation to and from Boston. The numbers don't lie. What once took an hour by boat or by car due to traffic now takes just 35 minutes by train. However, the primary reason the MBTA wanted to activate this railroad line was to remove cars from the highway and to thus reduce pollution and traffic congestion.
Something in excess of $500 million so far has removed perhaps 700 cars a day from the expressway.
It was nearly impossible for the MBTA to substantially reduce traffic. Pollution wasn't reduced either.
But we had a very active member of AFTA named Kevin O'Keefe, who was an MIT engineer, and he said, based on his experience with diesel, a diesel engine project at MIT, or that he said there's no way that you have there's no way that you can produce clean air improvements.
Despite failing the MBTA's objectives, the Greenbush Line gave Hingham a valuable alternate means of commuting. Positive comments attended many of our interviewees as well as David Clinton called it a dream come true, the alternative to fighting traffic on the Route 3 Distressway, even though he doesn't commute to Boston for work. However well situated to commuters on the South Shore, opponents to the train often cite low ridership. Mike Weymouth said that the MBTA missed the projected ridership figures by a country mile. Clearly, Greenbush ridership figures don't reflect the true number of travelers the train is used to commuting for. Low ridership might be because of the recession. The South Shore had adequate transportation facilities prior to Greenbush. Therefore, though the numbers aren't high, the introduction of the train proved favorable from a transportation viewpoint, and though marginally beneficial, the project's shortcomings or its impact on the character of the town and the housing market were negligent. While debate revolved around the project's extensive costs, political complications left debaters to overcome unnecessary hurdles and to solve environmental problems. Finally, though, efforts by Macmillan Citizens Group, the Buick SAFTA, the MBTA, and the Army Corps of Engineers ensured that Hingham benefited from a convenient mode of transportation and made aesthetic and economic gains. John Buick, who had advised Martha because of their mutual opposition to Greenbush, put it perfectly.
That is a series of balances. You may lose an issue, but you can gain a wife. So.